Okay, hey everybody. We're back and talking to a good friend of mine. This is Lee Clark Sellers. I'll let her introduce herself. But one of the things I really wanted to talk to Lee about is the idea of how to gather trends and how to find them in your marketplace. Lee's a former chief innovation officer of a large corporation, and just a very unique and interesting way about going about gathering trends. So, hi Lee, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work and how you do trend spotting?
All right. Hi, Jeffrey. Sure. So as you've said, I've been Chief Innovation Officer of a major corporation, spent a couple of years in academia and worked in other industries as well. So one of the items that I've always been focused in on is really understanding the value of looking outside your company and looking outside your industry for trends. Because I think with all of the industries that I've ever worked in, our trends, our information on our trends come from other industries, not just from where we currently work at today. So I can share a little bit of my insights based on that.
Well, I'd love to talk to you because I think a lot of people think about the trends in their industry. And one of the things that always interested me was you were always reaching outside of your industry, A, and B, you had a much more, I would call it a more tactile approach, if that's the correct way of talking about it. So tell us a little bit about how you found trends and where you went to find trends, both inside and outside your industry.
Yeah, certainly. So, I've tried, some of the traditional methods of using big consulting firms, right?
Mhm.
Where you give them a subject matter, they go out, they do the tech landscaping, they tell you who's doing what in those industries, produce really in-depth material. And, I find that very useful as well. But one of the key aspects that I've always employed is I like to be more hands-on. I like to
Mhm.
actually go and observe, and I like to find opportunities that allow me to look for trends. And one of the more interesting associations that I've been involved in and I have attended is the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, as
Right.
an example. And what I like about that show is, I tend to go year over year. And an area as an example that, oh gosh, probably 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it was just a few booths. It was interesting, but it was a few booths, and that was around smart home technology. And you could see year over year, the footprint for that topic grew and grew at CES to the point where it's an entire section of CES now. So I looked at that and it gave me the view that, okay, what seems to be kind of gadgety, there's some interesting things here, but it really grew from a trend into, no, this is reality. This is what's going to happen now. So that trend became realized. And I could tell that through just the sheer number of vendors that started getting involved.
Mhm.
Then you started getting big companies involved, and then you had the partnerships. And what I love about that conference is oftentimes I go very early on and I find some of these companies and I just sit down and chat with them. Where are they going? What did they see? And we've been able to leverage that several times in looking at partnerships and doing some joint exploration of areas. So smart home is just one example. Another example that I just witnessed grow over the years would be things like additive manufacturing, so
Mm.
3D printing.
Yes, yes.
Going from simple polymer strings to now metal strings, right? It's just amazing the applications of that type of technology. So what was once very niche and
Mhm.
okay, yeah, it's a specialized kind of geeky thing over here is pretty mainstream now. It's amazing to see how mainstream that technology is, but yet it continues to evolve. So leveraging a conference like CES, I was looking in areas that were completely outside of our industry.
Mhm.
I would go over to the sports area, the
Okay.
biometrics that they're putting on rings and wearables. And how do you translate that into sensor technology that could be used in the industries in which I've worked? And so there's a lot of transferability of these technologies across industries. And I happened to work in an industry that was a bit slow to take up new technologies,
Mhm.
but eventually it would happen. So it was critical to really look at other industries to see what was happening and then eventually how to really bring that in to our industry and use that as differentiation. It might not be a huge success for the first couple of years, but over time it would become very much ingrained in the way we would do business.
Yeah, there are two things out of that I'd love to talk to you about, because I think you're a bit unique in the fact that as a senior executive, you're still doing that experiential learning. You're going out yourself to learn. What do you think the difference is between, say, reading what someone says about trends, the tech scouting and all those kinds of things, and actually going out and doing it yourself? What more benefit did you get from going and doing it versus just reading about it?
Yeah, good question. I think there's value to both, of course. I think for me personally, I tend to be more of an applied person. I like to visually see and be able to discuss. So one of my challenges in going to a conference like CES is my time management, because I can just do a deep dive on some topics, and before I know it, half a day is gone. So the advantage of actually going out and experiencing this for yourself is you have one idea, but based on the conversations you're having with people around you, or the people that are actually showcasing this idea, is that leads to more questions and more questions. So you actually get to develop out the storyboard over time through these conversations, versus when you read it, you can only experience what the author tells you about it. And so you have more borders around you when you're just reading versus experiencing. And the other item with experiencing is everyone experiences it a little bit differently. It's almost like how we visualize color. We all see color a little bit different. Red is not red, is not red, is not red. So it's the same thing when you're actually going and you talk to some people about their ideas, their technology, their whatever they may be showcasing, is that your brain's going to interpret your conversation a little differently. I remember going, and I had a colleague go with me to one of these conferences. And after a day of it, I remember the colleague saying, there's nothing we can use here. And it blew me away, because I'm like probably, mentally 50 pages of ideas of how we could leverage this. So it's also important that you are able to look at it with open eyes, not just open ears, but open eyes, and to be able to absorb what you're hearing and be able to interpret it and translate it in a lot of different ways, versus just taking the absolute of what they're presenting. So I think experiencing that directly versus just reading about it, it gives you those new pathways to be thinking about what you're actually experiencing.
So one last question, and it deals with what you were just wrapping up there. But you mentioned earlier taking really disparate things, sporting goods, home technologies, other emerging technologies, but you have to take all these disparate ideas and trends and bring them into something. What's your method for sort of assimilating all that and saying, okay, this is what I think it means for us?
So it varies, I think. Oftentimes you're looking for a problem to solve, right? Because what you don't want to do is just simply introduce something new, a new widget, but it really isn't solving a problem. It's not helping. It's not increasing the value of what you're trying to do. So oftentimes, as I'm looking at all of these different, I love going to the car section at CES, right? Just amazing. These aren't cars anymore. They're platforms for computer or for software, right? Sure. So you take that, and then you take the smart home, you take what's happening in athletics or home health, and you look at all these different things, what they're the value that they're solving, and usually you can find some common threads with what you're trying to do as well in your industry. And then you just have to pull on those threads a little bit. Sometimes it's a bit of a reach, but that's the value of physically being there and being able to talk to people. You get that back and forth, and you can eventually come out with, yeah, this makes sense. We can actually kind of, take these divergent ideas and bring them together into something that's pretty unique and interesting.
So I realized I had one more question, because I think somebody watching this may say, well, Lee can do that, but can I do it? Do you think you're unique in your ability to go out and find those trends and synthesize them? Or is this something that really all companies should be doing, and more people are really capable of doing? They just don't know they're capable of doing it.
I think absolutely anyone can do it. I do think that there are certain skills that you can develop yourself. in terms of being able to understand and look at these different technologies. How do you bring those together? You know, there's a training methodology I think the military uses actually, where you walk into the room and it's that peripheral vision. And it's understanding what's in the room without having to actually look around the room. It's that peripheral vision that you can teach yourself. And for me, looking at these various trends and trying to bring them together relate a lot to peripheral vision. And I think that those are skills that people can develop. I think that people tend not to, but you can very easily pick up a couple of traits, whether it's developing out peripheral vision or making yourself go out and look at different industries. And but as you go to those industries, go out there with an open mindset. And the more you experience, the more you can pull things together. So I think absolutely companies, it should be mandatory that they have people that are doing it. And I think that people can learn those skills.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think I often say that this is probably the low hanging fruit on the tree, you know, understanding where the future is. Isn't that hard if you're willing to go do it? But so few people do it, and so few people do it well that I think they leave a lot of opportunity on the table. Well, at any rate, I think we're out of time. Lee, I want to thank you for your discussion on at least what I call your tactile trend spotting, and really appreciate your time today.
Certainly. It was a pleasure talking with you, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you.